Welcome Wargamers to the fiery magma holds of the Mortal Realms, because today we are talking all about the Fyreslayers. The Sons of Grimnir, one of the coolest armies that has ever been graced to the Age of Sigmar tables. If you follow the channel for quite some time, you know that I did a series previously regarding the Fyreslayers, but it's been a while. They got some new lore in their battle tome, and I've progressed a lot as a storyteller, and so I'd like a fresh shot at it. And I honestly think that the 3rd edition battle tome is so fantastic and just dripping with character, it's the perfect time to redo this series. So we're going to talk about the origins of the Fyreslayers, what makes them unique, and over the course of the next week ask the question, why should you be playing this army? Because they're so stinking cool. Now, really quick before I get into that, I do have a link in the description down below for Noble Knight Games here in the United States. They're in the Midwest. They're a fantastic supplier of Games Workshop and honestly any kind of game products with discounts all around. They ship within 48 hours, and I've had nothing but a great time doing business with them. So if this inspires you to start a Fyreslayer army of your own, or some army that's meant to specifically hunt Fyreslayers, go ahead and check that out. It would mean the world to me because affiliate links go a long way to supporting me, my wife, this channel, all of that. So if you are new to Age of Sigmar, or at least this faction, and you have no idea what the Fyreslayers are, let's talk about it. Essentially, these are one of the Dwarven races of the setting. Games Workshop has their own proprietary word, Dwarven, but essentially anyone who understands general fantasy like Tolkien stuff would see these guys as dwarves. Some common themes that run amongst them are the pursuit of gold and mercenary contracts, a huge emphasis on martial combat, specifically melee. I mean, like, has to be up front, in your face, hitting you with an axe kind of melee. They value oaths, the deeds of their ancestors, like their reputation and lineage that come from. But there's so much more to them than that, and it really all comes down to their deity, Grimnir. So we're going to start there, and then I'm going to basically unpack how Grimnir has formed this very unique faction in the Mortal Realms. Long ago, in a world that was Warhammer Fantasy Battles, Grimnir was one of the deities of the Dwarven race from way back when. It's not really gone into how much detail, how it happened, but he did make the transfer from the world that was, meaning Fantasy Battles, to the Age of Sigmar. We know that he spent at least some time in the Realm of Chaos just like thrashing stuff, and somehow got spit out into the Mortal Realms, which is a great story. Also happened to a named character named Gotrek Gunnarsson. It just seems to be a story arc for the dwarves of like going into hell and then getting spit out. And so he's in the Mortal Realms, and he finds his brother in spirit, which is Grugni, who is the Dwarven god of crafting, and the two of them really set out to lead the Dwarven as a people. Now, keep in mind something here. Before, in previous Fyreslayer battle tomes, it really was made to sound as if Grimnir and Grugni were the only two deities of the dwarves. However, in our current battle tome, it has been expanded a bit to leave room for more characters. One from the old world that I hear mentioned a lot is Viria, who was a female dwarven hero. I don't know much about the old world. I don't know much about Viria, but here's what I do know. In the new battle tome, there's apparently a pantheon of Dwarven gods, and at some point there is a schism and they fall apart. And this essentially pits Grimnir and Grugni against the overwhelming majority of them. So much so that eventually the two of them are left tied and chained to the top of a mountain by their peers. So just and that's all the battle tome says. So like all we know is the story starts with Grimnir and Grugni chained to a mountain they could never escape from. Something huge happened in the past, and I can't wait for Games Workshop to explore that. This is where they are found by Sigmar in the Age of Myth. They are released, and essentially at this point, Grugni vows to be basically like the master artisan and forge master for Sigmar to thank him for freedom. And Grimnir, who feels as though he's indebted to the god king Sigmar, says, I'm going to work for you to pay off this debt, but I'm going to do it with combat. So why don't you point me towards the biggest problem that you have, and I'll go take care of it. Right? Point me towards a monster that's ruining things. I'm going to go slay that monster for you. Which is like, that's doing somebody a solid. Good on him. Some time passes in the interim. Grimnir starts to walk amongst what would become the Fyreslayers, but just normal dwarves that have already set up shop in the realm of fire. He starts kind of becoming a father figure and deity to them. So I guess there is this point where there are Dwarven who revere Grimnir almost exclusively because they just are really... his martial combat and his pride and honor and sort of like that patriarchal structure really appeals to them. But they're not quite Fyreslayers just yet, and you'll see why in a bit. Back to our story. Sigmar looks around and he sees this huge salamander, a god beast called Volcatrix, the mother of all salamanders. And in the story, like, when Grimnir meets Volcatrix, she just finished, like, eating an entire town or something like that, just turned it to ash and then it was just eating it up. And Grimnir's like, absolutely, I'll slay that beast for you. Let's go do it. And he just kind of goes hog wild. And their fight is supposed to, has all the epic Age of Myth lingo to it. So it's very verbose. They thrashed for days. Magmadroth's tail whipped the ground and created a lava river. And they destroyed a mountain. And, all the big fluffy stuff, right? Well, this fight is winding down. They're both getting exhausted. And so Volcatrix, the god beast, basically starts going into a gallop charge into Grimnir, who seeing the challenge, runs into, I don't know what a stunty little run would be for him, but essentially they just headbutt each other at full speed, and the impact of a god and a god beast hitting each other had an immense impact on the environment. Essentially, they both went away, okay? When they struck each other, something happened to Grimnir. This event, this shattering is what I'm going to call it, because there's not really a specific term for when this happened. Essentially, the mineral-rich body of Volcatrix and the deity spirit of Grimnir fused and then exploded like a big bang. What flew out of that event was this substance called Urgold. To you and I, it looks just like normal gold. So it's almost like they smashed each other and the entire thing got glitter party sprinkled with gold everywhere. But to the Fyreslayers, they found out very quickly that they can tell the difference, certain Dwarven can, between normal gold and what's Urgold. And the difference is, one of them has the power of their god in it. So let's think about what this means for them, right? We have a group of Dwarven that revere Grimnir, and they just watch their god die, straight up. All that's left of him are these weird little pieces of metal that they just seem to have this power infused with them. And what they deduce, I'm just going to kind of yada yada just to kind of get you the sense of what they understand now, is that the spirit of Grimnir has been sealed inside Urgold. So they started collecting it and started crafting like runes and stuff like that. So they wear little trinkets and necklaces, and they realized when they were in battle, they would start to glow. And the power of Grimnir would be released, and they would get a big battle frenzy. Again, they're channeling the power of a god inside of them, or at least a small sliver of it, and they would be better at combat. Somehow they are able to intuit that the more of this power they release, the more likely Grimnir will return. Once his essence is divorced from the Urgold, he will be able to return to his people. Now, it took a lot of time, like I said, I yada-yada'd a little bit to kind of get us to this point, but essentially what the Fyreslayers are is a race of dwarves that have intense military and combat values, whose sole purpose might look militaristic, constantly going out and fighting for gold. They're kind of a mercenary company, some of them are anyway. But the truth is, it's actually a low-key religious movement. They're trying to reclaim their deity. He is lost to them. They are fatherless. But their whole point is to go out, get Urgold, expend that in the glory of melee combat, and that will bring back their god. Now, a few things. One, they do not tell anybody about this. This is their secret. Races outside of, other Dwarven maybe don't understand that Urgold contains a very specific essence inside of it. They don't understand the grand plan of hoarding it to release Grimnir himself. And so that's where we start to get this dichotomy of the Fyreslayers. on the outside, people look at them and like, you guys are this weird, nutty, religious warrior faction. You hire yourselves out to some dubious people. They do sometimes take contracts from chaos factions to, as long as the chaos guys pay up, they don't care. They want that gold. So it seems dubious, but at the same time, they do have a sense of honor. They honor every oath and contract that they make, no matter who it's to. They do revere heroism and that kind of stuff. So like there's so many good elements, but people look at it and just kind of scratch their heads like, what are you guys doing? How did you survive the age of chaos? How is all this happening? And internally, right, the flip side of that dichotomy is the Fyreslayers are like, we're not just a religious, mercenary company. We are zealous crusaders on a holy mission, which is a completely different temperament than they show on the outside. And when you consider that their payment for services rendered, meaning whether they're protecting, a Dawnbringer crusade who's setting up a new city, which it's mentioned a few times that they do in this book, or if it's, going and hunting down a chaos army or whatever, or even working for a chaos army and hunting somebody else, it doesn't matter because all of those things still fit into their worldview of a righteous religious act, because at the end of the day, we're getting Grimnir back. Now, why I love them is that this creates an immense amount of rich narratives for storytelling. Like, there's the motivation opportunities here for both their allies looking in at them and trying to hire them, and their enemies feeling the brunt of why they're being attacked is just for money. And you have elements of greed, but also religious fervor. Like, all of these things are happening, and they're all accurate from a certain perspective. And that's why I say they're great for storytelling, fodder, is because that's the thing great narratives are made of. Everyone's the hero of their own story, and so the Rune Fathers who run a Fyreslayer army, always, no matter who they're working for, there's always this secret mission that supersedes everything else. And all they want to do is get their deity back. And you want to talk about narrative, cannon fodder, that kind of stuff. Man, I love the idea of secret missions, right? Like when you hire an ally and they have a contract to fulfill and they're going to fight on your side, but man, they have this secondary quest in the back of their head that supersedes everything. And you can set up some great storytelling situations where that mission conflicts with what they're currently doing. Now, we're going to spend the entire week talking about the Fyreslayers, and in the next video, we're going to talk about kind of what their civilization looks like, more of a day-to-day thing. This video had much more to do with their mythos and motivations and stuff, but I wanted to end this video talking about why I think their origin story is so cool. And for me, it all comes down to Urgold. And I was kind of thinking of different analogies and ways to think about this substance, right? A lot of times when I read this lore, the lore in the battle tomes can be a little bit dry sometimes, but I try to take like real world situations and apply them and go, that understandably, what would that be like in real life? And I have one for us today. I was watching a video about the first rover that landed on the planet of Mars, and there was a brilliant female scientist who was explaining how hard this all was to do. And they showed a video of the rover scooping up a piece of dirt from the surface of Mars. And the lady interjected and kind of went off on a tangent, and this is my favorite thing ever. And she said, what you're actually looking at is an RC car that we threw into space real fast, landed somewhere, and is scooping a handful of dirt. Okay, that's all it is on the surface. But beyond that, it's more than that, because it's not just scooping up a piece of dirt. This is matter that has never been a part of your existence. In fact, the divide between you and whatever that rover scoops is so vast that you have not been in contact with any of it in eons throughout space. So even though it's a common thing, a scoop full of dirt, there is this existential attachment to it that is like, this is the other. It's a foreign thing that I will never hold, and it's difficult for me as a human with limited senses and intelligence to conceptualize how vastly different of a life and a life cycle this thing has had. And I love that because when you talk about Urgold, it's reinforced multiple times. When other people hold Urgold, they're like, yeah, it's gold. It's worth money. That's cool, right? And you can do whatever you want. You can do alchemical stuff with it. You can trade it. You can sell it. You can do whatever you want. But a Fyreslayer looks at that same piece of gold and understands the existential implications of it, that he perceives it in a vastly different way. and in a way that you could never understand, right? Because even if they tell you what the secret is, how are you going to comprehend what it means to have your personal deity walk among you? Like, that's so far out there. I love it. And that to me is just one of the most refreshing things about the book, is that you can have good guys and bad guys that have stockpiles of gold that do not understand the value of what they're holding. They can't grasp it. And the Fyreslayers look at that and they go, hey, that's not just dirt. That has some serious existential meaning for me. And for that, I think the Fyreslayers have a wholly unique mission and purpose and way that they fit into the Grand Alliance of Order. Because, you know, a lot of times we look at the Grand Alliance of Order and we're like, why would these guys ever work together? You know, you got like the Daughters of Cain. It's like nobody likes them, but we want their help, and we'd rather have their help than letting the Chaos guys have their help, kind of a deal. Where it's more of like a tenuous ally at best. But then you look at the Fyreslayers, and for some of the lodges, you can be like, you guys are honorable, you're awesome, we want you on our team. Volstarg Lodge is sort of like the poster boys for that kind of thing. They were very instrumental in the Realmgate Wars, like the opening acts of the Age of Sigmar narrative. And then you have some where I believe it's the Greyfeared, who are just like, y'all are shady AF. You'll work for anybody for any money. Again, but those two lodges, right, no matter how shady or honorable the contracts that you accept are, they're both in the pursuit of the very same thing. And again, that's the whole deal with like that kind of secondary mission makes motivations for factions very, very interesting. And that's something I hope I can convey throughout the week as we explore the various, the Zargrim priesthood, which is sort of their religious order, the way that the magma holds are structured, and that kind of stuff, which we'll get into tomorrow. I hope that we can articulate that pretty well, because these guys are a fascinating army, and I hope that you'll stick with me along the journey. So friends, thank you so much for watching and listening, and let me ask you this: what is your favorite part of the story of Grimnir? As we talk about the mythic beginnings of the Fyreslayers, we'll move into the more detailed stuff later, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this tale. So leave the comments down below. I will respond to you there. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.